Hey again, everybody. This is Barry Owen with Wowza, and I am here with Rose Power again.
Hello, everyone.
And we are going to start today with session 3 of our Wowza API video tutorials. So today we're going to cover a bit more of an advanced workflow, or really just some things you can do to tune your live streams and transcoders via the API. So as always, building on the previous sessions, we're just going to start with a new live stream so we know we're in a good state. So I'm going to go ahead and create this live stream here. A couple things to note is just note the name for now, so that'll be good. So once you've created a live stream, if you need to make changes to it, you don't necessarily have to delete it and start over. You can update the live stream you've created. And what we're going to do here is we're just going to show, a very simple update. In this case, we're changing the name. We're tweaking a buffer size. We're adding a description. And in this case, turning off the stream smoother. The other values you see there are actually the defaults. We're not really changing those, but they're in there. So we're going to go ahead and send that. And what we'll get back is, the new transcoder payload that's been completely updated. And what you can see here is the name has in fact changed. And you can trust me and double check my work that all these other guys changed too. So that's just an easy way to make a change. If you created a transcoder and, oh shoot, I named that my transcoder, I wanted to name it Rose's transcoder, it's easy to change. Now, as far as the behavior of the live stream, there's kind of two different parts. You can change the behavior of the transcoder like we did here. We were just changing some properties there. You can make tons of changes and change all kinds of stuff within there if you want to. There's also the changer of the output. So how is the HLS output generated? What are some of the parameters of that? And that's what we're going to look at next. So one of the things here that we're going to look at is the HLS chunk size. So by default in Wowza Cloud, the HLS chunk size is 6 seconds, which, for most applications is perfectly fine. And it follows Apple's recommendation for, kind of the optimum chunk size. However, that will create 20, 30 seconds of latency in your final output. So if you're looking for lower latency, you can certainly do that. You can change your chunk size to any value, really. The only caveat being is your chunk size can't go below your keyframe interval. So if your keyframe interval is 1 second, you could do 1 second chunk size. If it's 2 seconds, you can do 2 second chunk sizes.
Eric, I have a question.
Yes.
In the previous step for update transcoder, I thought I saw in the JSON response for low latency, you had false. If I'm new to this and I wanted to lower this chunk size, would I also need to change that setting to true?
Ideally, you would to kind of get the cleanest setup. What that does is it alters some internal buffering in the transcoder and the packager that, if you're really looking to drive the latency down as low as practical, I want to say practical and not possible, and I'll tell you why in a second, but yeah, that's a good idea to set that to true.
Okay.
So there's trade-offs, right? So I could drive this latency down to 1 second per chunk, assuming my keyframe interval, my GOP size is 1 second, but you're risking player buffering at this point. So, you'll need to experiment this with a solid network connections for your player clients. 2 seconds will work. But if you're starting to see a bunch of buffering and things like that, you might want to up this size a little bit to make sure that your viewers are getting the best experience they can. Everything's a trade-off, right? Nothing's free. So to drive the latency down, sometimes you're going to sacrifice some experience if not everybody's on a great network connection.
Right. You have to find a sweet spot.
The other thing you can do, and this is kind of a nice feature, is you can increase the playlist size. So in this case, the the reason to do that is because let's say you want to basically enable the HLS to have a DVR functionality from within your player. In order to do that, the HLS playlist needs to be longer so you can actually seek back a certain amount. Otherwise, it's only going to be 3 chunks long, and we just changed it to 2 seconds, so you'd have a 6-second DVR window. That's not super exciting for someone. In this case, we're going to change it to 3,600 seconds. So now you have an hour worth of scrolling you could do on a live stream. And again, that's a real simple change, and we'll just go ahead and send it so you can see it in action. And yes, indeed, it returned that, okay, cool, I set the playlist to an hour. Another thing you can do, and this is a little bit more advanced, but if you have an RTMP stream coming in, and that RTMP stream has data events in it, and you want those data events to come through and persist out into the final HLS output as ID3 tags, you can enable this property. And this is a really useful thing to have timed metadata markers in your HLS output stream. This could be useful for things like advertising. You could use it just to do synchronization between an application that's on the page with your player and things. So one of the examples we built was kind of a version of an HQ trivia app, and we used the metadata in the stream to trigger when we would show questions and things like that and make sure they were in synchronization with the video. For an advanced exercise that we're not going to go through here today, we have a document that shows you how you can actually inject metadata into a running transcoder without it having to be in the RTMP stream. And that basically involves grabbing a URL that allows you to push that metadata in the transcoder directly. And we have a document on that. It's a little bit involved, so we won't go into it today, but just so you're aware, you can actually do that. Lastly, for this section, for how you can alter the HLS output, the packaging behavior, is the ability to easily add encryption. And what this will do is this will AES 128 encrypt the actual data chunks of the stream as they're created. The way this works is you have a shared key that your player can fetch, and that the packager uses to encrypt the same. So as part of what this is you need to include a value for the player to go get this key to decrypt the chunks. And what you'll want to have, of course, is logic within your player and that URL so that you authenticate those users and make sure those users should have access to be able to decrypt those chunks. So it's not as all-encompassing as DVR. There's not a bunch of specific roles and properties and permissions and things like that. But for certain use cases, it's enough. And that capability is available. We also do, within streaming Wowza video, have the ability to do DRM. It does require you at this point to bring your own DRM account. So we're not going to go into that today, but just, if you do need full-on DRM, that is in fact available.
That's what I was going to ask you, because I know that you said it's very easy to set it up in the API call, but before you can do that step, you have to actually set up a DRM account with the provider that you'll be using, correct?
You do.
Okay.
And the configuration is really straightforward. You can do it. You can configure it via the API, or you can configure it via the user interface. I didn't show it because I don't have a DRM account to show you. So that kind of wraps up the somewhat simple things you can do as far as updating, modifying, tuning, tweaking a live stream once you've created it. Next, we're going to talk about a cool little application that I know Rose gets lots of questions about. And it's really useful for scenarios where you have a live stream running and you want to put up a slate or something like that will play. It could play anything, right? I mean, you could be playing advertising, you could be playing just any kind of pre-roll until your live stream is available. And we call that loop until live. And basically what that does is it allows you to specify a file. And again, this file can be any MP4 file. You want to make sure that the file itself is encoded as the same way your video source is. So if you're sending a 1080p stream as your live video, you want your filler file to be a 1080p stream. Ideally with same encoding parameters as far as keyframe interval and things like that. Bitrate can be different, that doesn't matter as much. So once you've done that, right, so we've created our live stream. Again, this is a modification of an existing live stream. So we're going to go ahead and send that. Uh-oh. I've got an error. I discovered that I was trying to send the wrong command when I needed to send a post. I think I was sending a patch here. So didn't work. Got it all squared away. Now we're going to send this, and this will configure our transcoder to loop the file when, you know, either previous to the source arriving or if the source goes away. One of the other options you can do for this file is if you have a shorter file, or if you're just trying to loop a slate, there's no reason to have an hour-long slate. You can have a short file and you can set it to repeat. So we'll go in here and we'll just set a property of the loop until live that allows me to make that file repeat for as long as necessary until the source file arrives.
So Barry, when you said previously, you could use loop until live, this API call, if the stream goes away, you mean if something happens with the encoder, your stream drops, it will switch over to this MP4 file, and then when the encoder comes back, it switches back to the live stream?
Right, absolutely. And there's a configurable timeout for that to you know, because sometimes your encoder may be struggling and reconnecting, disconnecting. You don't want to constantly flip loop to live in. But let's say your encoder goes away for 10 seconds. You can have it so it kicks the slate in, and you know, could be technical difficulties or whatever you want to say there. And then when the live stream comes back, it will resume.
Cool.
One other feature that we want to look at here is super useful, and that's the ability to start and stop live streams on a schedule. So what you can do is create a schedule, and what the schedule requires is a few things, right? And you can have start only schedules, you can have start stop schedules, or you can have a stop schedule, and they can kind of run all at different times. What I have here is a combined one that is going to actually start something and stop it after a certain duration. And all that's really required in here is the transcoder ID. So the transcoder ID or the live stream ID, you put that in there, you create the schedule. And in this case, my schedule is going to run every weekday. And in this case, my schedule might not make a lot of sense because I have it running for multiple days. But it's basically going to start and stop the transcoder. In this case, I really have it set up to start and stop the transcoder every 14 days. But what you probably want to do here is have something more along the lines of, and we can actually change it. So let's see, we'll change it to the 15th, starts at 0. And in this case, let's start it at, you know, so it's going to run every day, every weekday for 15 minutes in this case. So we're going to go ahead and create this schedule. Gives you a success, shows the schedule, shows the data you sent. And by default, the schedule's enabled. So that's important to know. Once you do this, it's going, it's ready. Of course, you can disable the schedule. That's fairly easy to do. You just call disable, tells you it's been disabled. You can re-enable it. Now it's enabled again. And of course, if you don't want it anymore, you can delete it. And to point out, you can also update the schedule. So, right, so once you've created the schedule, if you actually want to modify it without recreating it, you certainly can. I find it's usually easy for schedules. They're fairly lightweight. I just delete them and restart them.
I was going to ask you about that because there are people that have, regularly scheduled streams every single week, and they need to just go in and embed the stream of the week, the new one, the most recent video. So you're saying they have an option. You could go in and just would that be a patch request?
Yeah, you could do a patch request basically at this same endpoint here and just change the transcoder ID.
I see.
And that would actually apply this schedule you've already created, but modify it to work with a different transcoder.
Okay, so you could go this way, or you could do it the way you said. It's just easy enough to create a new one if you want, but you have the choice.
Yeah, it's up to you. It's kind of how you prefer to manage them and keep track of them and things like that. And of course, once you've created these, we can go. You can certainly go see them in the UI. So we'll go look at this one real quick. We'll send this one again since I deleted it. If you go over here in the UI, so you'll see my schedule's been created, and it runs every weekday for 15 minutes.
Great.
Cool. Well, that's it for this session of our talks. I hope you find these methods useful for you to kind of fine-tune your workflows and add some cool new features. And we'll see you back for the next session in a few days.